They were told it was impossible. A prison surrounded by freezing waters, guarded like a fortress, and designed to be escape-proof. Yet on a foggy night in 1962, 3 men vanished from Alcatraz and were never seen again. Frank Morris, John Anglin, Clarence Anglin. 3 names etched into American mystery. But here's the twist. New evidence uncovered in 2025 may finally break the case wide open. For over 60 years, the world believed they drowned, that the cold currents of San Francisco Bay swallowed them whole. But what if the truth is far more incredible? Could these men have outsmarted the most secure prison in the United States and gotten away with it? Could they have walked among us, started new lives, and watched their own legends grow? Today, we're diving into cutting-edge science, reanalyzed FBI files, and chilling forensic discoveries. Because what we've uncovered this year might just rewrite everything. From facial recognition breakthroughs to tidal flow simulations, what was once considered impossible now seems disturbingly plausible. And the deeper we dig, the more convincing the story becomes. Did they survive? Did they slip through the cracks of history? Or did the truth drown with them? Let's uncover what really happened on the night America's most famous prison break changed everything. June 11, 1962. In the dead of night, 3 inmates pulled off one of the most legendary escapes in criminal history, from what was supposed to be the most escape-proof prison on Earth. Alcatraz, a federal fortress on a wind-battered island in San Francisco Bay. With its icy currents, relentless tides, and armed guards patrolling the towers, it was designed to break even the most determined spirit. But Frank Morris, along with brothers John and Clarence Anglin, had something else: patience, intelligence, and a plan so daring it stunned the nation. For over a year, they worked silently, chipping away at the walls of their cells using spoons, drills made from vacuum motors, and pure ingenuity. Each night, they disguised the noise with music and concealed the damage with painted cardboard. Behind the walls, a hidden utility corridor no one patrolled. They crafted dummy heads out of soap, plaster, and real hair from the prison barber shop, so lifelike they fooled guards during night checks. Above the ceiling, they stashed raincoats, which they stitched and sealed into a makeshift raft and life vests. At precisely the right moment, they struck, crawling through vents, scaling pipes, prying open the roof, and disappearing into the black waters of San Francisco Bay. By morning, the cells looked undisturbed. But when one of the dummy heads rolled off a pillow and smashed on the floor, the illusion shattered. Alcatraz was in full panic. Boats, helicopters, and search teams mobilized. Debris washed up, a paddle, a wallet, a piece of the raft, but no bodies. The FBI, Coast Guard, and U.S. Marshals launched the largest manhunt in West Coast history. For decades, the official story remained unchanged. They drowned. Cold water, strong currents, no sign of life. Case closed. But what really happened? These weren't ordinary inmates. Frank Morris had an IQ of 133 and a lifelong history of outsmarting the system. The Anglin brothers had already escaped from multiple prisons, and something about this escape just didn't feel like a doomed attempt. It felt calculated. It felt rehearsed. It felt unfinished. The escape from Alcatraz wasn't just a story of 3 men breaking out. It was the day America realized even its most impenetrable prison wasn't invincible. For decades, the dominant narrative held firm. They drowned. The icy waters, brutal currents, and makeshift raft left little room for hope. But in 2025, that narrative began to crack, thanks to science. The most significant breakthrough came from an unlikely source: hydrodynamic modeling software, technology that didn't exist back in 1962. Researchers at a marine institute ran simulations of the San Francisco Bay using real-time tide charts, moon phases, wind patterns, and temperature data from the night of June 11, 1962. What they found was astonishing. If Morris and the Anglins launched their raft between 11:30 p.m. and 12:15 a.m., the tide wouldn't have dragged them out to sea. Instead, it would have pulled them toward the Marin headlands, toward freedom. In fact, the current could have functioned like a natural conveyor belt, gently guiding them to the shore north of the Golden Gate Bridge, assuming they paddled with minimal coordination. For years, experts argued the 53-degree water would have caused hypothermia in minutes. But modern survival modeling suggests something different. If they wore the raincoats, as they did, and conserved body heat by huddling or lying low in the raft, survival was not only possible, it was probable. This changes everything. But the tide data is just one piece of the puzzle. Another revelation came from a completely different area: forensic material science. Remember that makeshift raft? Long believed to be a crude patchwork of rubber raincoats stitched together with desperation? Not quite. In 2025, scientists re-examined preserved samples and replicas of the raft using 3D imaging, chemical degradation analysis, and structural stress testing. The results revealed seams that appeared heat-sealed, likely by repurposing steam pipes from the prison utility rooms. This technique would have made the raft highly water-resistant, even in choppy waters. What once seemed like a desperate gamble now looked like precision engineering. In fact, experts noted similarities between the raft's design and modern-day inflatable rescue boats. It didn't stop there. A fresh look at FBI files, now digitized and searchable, turned up declassified internal memos suggesting that by 1967, federal investigators had reason to believe at least one Anglin brother had reached South America. One memo even noted an intercepted message implying contact had been made with family in Brazil. At the time, this evidence was dismissed, labeled circumstantial, unconfirmed, or too flimsy. But now, enter facial recognition software. One photograph, previously written off as a hoax, allegedly shows two men resembling the Anglin brothers on a rural Brazilian farm in 1975. For decades, it sat in a cold case folder, grainy, blurry, forgettable. But when scanned through an AI facial analysis system in 2025, it returned a match probability of over 90%. That's not conclusive, but it's no longer dismissible. And finally, linguistic forensics applied to letters allegedly sent by John Anglin, one surfacing in 2018, show writing patterns consistent with known samples from prison records. Some phrases, spelling errors, and sentence structures lined up too closely to ignore. Piece by piece, these breakthroughs paint a different picture. One where the escape was not just lucky, it was strategic. One where survival wasn't just possible, it was prepared for. And one where they drowned might finally be replaced by they made it. With science shifting the tide of public opinion, the big question remains: if they didn't drown, then where did they go? Over the years, several theories have emerged, some plausible, others wild. But now, with new data and modern tools, we can re-examine them with fresh eyes. Theory 1. The Marin Headlands Escape. This is now the most scientifically supported scenario. If Morris and the Anglins launched their raft at the right moment, the tides would have swept them north, not west. That would have landed them in the Marin Headlands, a rugged, forested region just beyond the Golden Gate Bridge. And there's more. A car was reported stolen near Sausalito the same night as the escape. The timing and location lined up perfectly. Was it them? No proof, but no denial either. The terrain in Marin is steep and remote, ideal for disappearing quickly. Local police at the time dismissed the idea, but today that dismissal feels rushed. If the escapees made it to the headlands, they could have traveled inland and vanished before sunrise. Theory 2. The Brazil connection. This is where things get really intriguing. For decades, the Anglin family insisted the brothers survived and even escaped to South America. The claim? They made it to Brazil, bought land, and lived under false names. The supporting evidence includes unsigned postcards, secret phone calls, and a photo allegedly taken in 1975 showing two men resembling the Anglins. Most people rolled their eyes. Until now. That photograph, scanned through AI facial recognition software in 2025, scored over 90% similarity to John and Clarence Anglin. Combine that with declassified FBI memos noting family communication from abroad, and suddenly, Brazil doesn't seem so far-fetched. What if they fled to a remote part of the country, built new identities, and lived out their days in silence? Theory 3. New lives in the U.S. In this version, the trio never left the country. They simply changed their identities and went underground. Dozens of alleged sightings followed over the years. Some in Georgia, others in Florida. One particularly emotional claim came from the Anglin family, who said the brothers visited their mother in disguise and sent her flowers every Mother's Day until she died. It sounds like folklore. But in the pre-digital age, changing your identity wasn't so hard, especially if you had family willing to help. No facial scans, no online trails, just a different name and a new zip code. Theory 4. They didn't survive long. This is the middle ground theory. They escaped Alcatraz and made it to land, but died shortly after. The rugged terrain, freezing temperatures, and exhaustion could have been too much. They may have collapsed from exposure or injuries. And in the remote wilderness of Marin or Angel Island, it's not impossible their remains were never found. It explains the lack of bodies while acknowledging the escape's success. Theory 5. The government knew. The most conspiratorial theory claims they didn't vanish, they were disappeared. Some believe the escape was part of a covert government deal. Morris, with his high IQ, may have been recruited. Or maybe the men were double-crossed, picked up by boat as planned, but never made it beyond that. There's zero concrete evidence. But strange gaps in records, sealed documents, and anecdotal whispers keep this theory alive. Every theory has holes, but each one is more plausible than the they-drowned story we've been told for decades. Because when you stack the science, the sightings, and the secrecy, it's hard not to believe they made it. Behind every great mystery lies a darker shadow, stories that go beyond logic, slipping into the realm of secrets, silence, and suspicion. And the Alcatraz escape is no exception. While the survival theories inspire fascination, others propose far more unsettling endings. Theory 1. Betrayed after escape. One grim possibility is that Morris and the Anglin brothers were betrayed, either by someone in their escape network or by an external contact. What if someone was waiting in a boat just as planned, but with other intentions? Some theorists believe the escape may have been hijacked by organized crime or underground networks. These men had criminal connections. What if someone saw them as a liability? Maybe they were picked up, silenced, and dumped at sea. No bodies, no questions. This theory fits with the eerie silence after the escape. No communication, no slip-ups, just nothing. Theory 2. Government cover-up. This is where things get murky. Documents related to the escape remained classified or redacted for decades. Why? Some believe the government covered up the truth, not because the men died, but because they lived. Why would they do that? Because Alcatraz was supposed to be escape-proof. Admitting a successful breakout from a maximum security federal prison would have been a national embarrassment, an admission of failure during a time of Cold War paranoia and political tension. If they survived, acknowledging that might have triggered lawsuits, investigations, and massive damage to federal credibility. Better to quietly file it away, close the case, and push the they drowned narrative. Even the FBI's closure of the case in 1979 feels convenient. The U.S. Marshals never followed suit. In fact, they still list the escapees as wanted. Why keep chasing ghosts? Unless there's still doubt? Theory 3. Secret recruitment. This one sounds like a movie script, but it's been floated. What if Frank Morris, with his high IQ and engineering skills, wasn't just escaping, but being recruited? Some believe the escape was an inside job linked to a covert program, offering Morris and the Anglins new identities in exchange for intelligence work or technical contributions during the Cold War. It's pure speculation, but strange gaps in prison logs, guard reports, and the airtight secrecy surrounding certain details only fuel the fire. These aren't the most cheerful theories, but they speak to the strange silence that followed the escape. No bodies, no proof, no closure. Sometimes, the darker stories feel truer than the official ones. The escape from Alcatraz wasn't just a logistical marvel. It struck a deeper cultural nerve, one that's divided public opinion ever since. Were Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers just dangerous criminals? Or were they misunderstood masterminds who outwitted an unforgiving system? Let's break it down. Frank Morris wasn't an ordinary inmate. Born in 1926, he grew up bouncing between foster homes, juvenile facilities, and detention centers. He was arrested for bank robbery and had already escaped from multiple prisons before landing at Alcatraz. His reported IQ? 133. A borderline genius. Then there's John and Clarence Anglin, raised in rural Georgia, 2 of 13 siblings. They had a history of robbery, sure, but also a history of loyalty and perseverance. Most importantly, they weren't known for violence. They were known for teamwork. So when these 3 men united in one prison, the result wasn't chaos, it was calculus. Their escape wasn't a fluke. It was the product of meticulous planning, engineering skill, and absolute determination. And yet we can't ignore the facts. They were convicted criminals. They broke the law, repeatedly. And they didn't escape for justice. They escaped for freedom. Still, that hasn't stopped the public from turning them into folk heroes. Over the decades, movies, books, and documentaries have portrayed them less as fugitives and more as symbols of resistance. The underdogs who defied authority. The clever few who beat the unbeatable system. In many ways, their story taps into something deeply human. The fantasy of escape, not just from prison, but from fate, from poverty, from being underestimated. It's the American outlaw myth, reborn inside cold concrete walls. But here's the dilemma. Can we admire the intelligence and resolve of men who used it to break laws? Does genius justify crime? There's no easy answer. And maybe that's why their story has lasted so long. Because it forces us to ask uncomfortable questions, not just about them, but about ourselves. Why do we root for the rule breaker? Why do we cheer for those who escape? And what does it say about our trust in the system they were trying to escape from? The escape from Alcatraz wasn't just an event, it became a legend. Just 1 year after the breakout, Alcatraz was permanently closed. But the island didn't fade into history. It became something else entirely, a symbol, a place of myth, rebellion, and curiosity. Today, Alcatraz is one of the most visited historic sites in the United States. Millions of tourists walk through its cell blocks, stare into the cells once occupied by Morris and the Anglin brothers, and wonder, how did they do it? Did they survive? Could I have? Their story was immortalized in the 1979 film Escape from Alcatraz, starring Clint Eastwood. The film dramatized the escape with chilling realism and helped turn the escapees into cinematic anti-heroes. Since then, documentaries, books, and podcast episodes have reignited interest with every generation, keeping the mystery alive. But it's not just about thrill or suspense. The Alcatraz escape became a cultural touchstone, a story of cleverness over brute force, of determination over confinement. It sparked discussions about prison conditions, government power, and what freedom truly means. In a way, the escapees succeeded in something far greater than just getting off the island. They escaped obscurity. They became part of American folklore. And their story endures not just because of what they did, but because we still don't know how it ended. Did Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers freeze in the bay, lost to the tides forever? Or did they step onto shore, vanish into the world, and outsmart the system that tried to contain them? Decades of research, forensic breakthroughs, and family testimonies have reshaped the story. What was once a closed case is now a living question mark. Maybe that's why this mystery endures. Because in the absence of answers, the legend grows. What do you believe? If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more true crime and history deep dives. Thanks for watching.